Good evening. Tonight we are going to have a Trimester 3 update for the Quaker Valley School District. My name is Andrew Serloff and I'm our Assistant Superintendent. For tonight's presentation, we're going to be discussing several key points, and these will serve as our agenda for this evening. We're going to discuss updates to COVID-19 and its direct impacts on the Quaker Valley school system, the decision-making process that the administration and the school board enter into when we make decisions regarding school learning models, the COVID-19 guidance that we've received from several health organizations and our local and state organizations, the transition planning that we have embarked upon for the third trimester, and the next steps in these transitions. So we begin tonight with a COVID-19 update. Allegheny County has changed its designation from substantial to moderate for COVID-19. And when we go from substantial to moderate or moderate to substantial, we must remain at that same level of transmission for 2 weeks across the county for the designation to change. So the designation to moderate became official February 26th, 2021. But notably, the deadline for our Trimester 3 selection forms was February 16th, 2021, while the county was still in substantial. So the district's planning for Trimester 3 was well underway in late January and early February, while we were significantly in substantial as a county for transmission. That obviously had an impact on the models and planning that was expected for the beginning of Trimester 3. So we'll discuss more later on this evening with regards to changes and transitions that are now being considered as we move through the beginning of Trimester 3. So if we talk simply about the designation of moderate and what that means for Quaker Valley, what it means is the district is no longer bound by the Pennsylvania Department of Education attestation form. That was a document that the superintendent and the board president signed several months ago, where the district was required to adhere to a number of mitigation efforts as well as recommendations and requirements for when the district had to close schools based on case numbers. We showed several charts earlier this year with the number of cases it would take to close each individual school building while we were in substantial and while we were under the attestation. At this point in time, those charts from the Department of Education are recommendations. They are no longer requirements. Individual school districts will determine, based on their own case numbers, how quickly those cases are spreading, the ability to contact trace, and the ability to clean and disinfect when closings should occur and how long those closings shall last. Districts are also no longer tracking that system based on the 14-day rolling average. So school districts can choose how they track their own case numbers and when to make those closing or learning model change decisions based on their own internal metrics. We are no longer subscribing to the state's 14-day rolling average system. However, should we return to substantial, all the requirements of the attestation form will resume. We will go back to the 14-day rolling average, and the charts with respect to case numbers and closings will go back to being requirements through the Pennsylvania Department of Education. All that said, the Quaker Valley School District still believes it's important and for transparency to show the COVID-19 case numbers and the numbers of students and staff members that are quarantined, so the COVID-19 case tracker on our website that has become an important communication tool will continue to be updated. So now I want to speak a little bit about the decision-making process. How does the administration go about making decisions and recommendations to the board with respect to learning models? The most important thing to remember is that as educators, we are not doctors, we are not medical scientists, we are not public health professionals. We rely on those experts from the CDC, from the Department of Education, from the Allegheny County Health Department and the Pennsylvania Department of Health to provide the research and the guidance that we need to make decisions within our school district. From there, we set plans in motion as to how we are going about our learning, how often we will have on-campus learning, what age groups is it appropriate to have full on-campus learning, how we're going to go about mitigation efforts, and all of the other items we've discussed this year with regard to our health and safety plans. From there, once the planning phase, we go into our implementation. We carry out exactly what we said we were going to do. Every day, there's revision. We revise plans, we revise efforts, we make different determinations. And after we revise, we receive new guidance. Within the confines of the last 12 months, we've probably received at least 10 sets of different guidance from the organizations listed here. That puts us back into the research phase, and we go back through our decision-making process. So with regards to some of that guidance, one of the biggest pieces of recent guidance that school districts had to work with was the CDC update from February 26, 2020. And I know this particular guidance has been seen across multiple media platforms and discussed at great length with regard to its impact on the opening of schools. But to be perfectly transparent and clear, the guidance that we received on February 26th from the CDC provided some clarity and some updates, but the guidance itself did not change. Regardless of the level of community transmission, all schools should use and layer mitigation strategies. This is something we've been doing since the very first health and safety plan that we went about enacting in August. All of those bullet points there are things that we've been doing to keep our students and staff safe. The most important of those mitigation strategies are the universal and correct use of masks at all levels of community transmission, regardless of what the numbers say. And we've been using masks since day one in all of our schools with fidelity. The second is physical distancing. This has not changed. Physical distancing is still recommended by the CDC of at least 6 feet and should be maximized to the greatest extent possible. Up to this point, the school district has used 6 feet as its standard. We have not had a singular classroom space at less than 6 feet. But in order to accomplish that, we've had to use hybrid models and cohorting in the elementary level and hire additional staff members to make that possible. Our recommendation this evening is still to maintain 6 feet to the greatest extent possible, but we may be in certain situations in certain classrooms where the distancing for students may be 4+ feet, but we will still attempt 6 feet to the greatest extent possible. So the recommendation we're going to make this evening will change for grades 6 through 12, the middle school and high school, to not a guarantee of 6 feet, but 6 feet to the maximum extent possible, but no less than 4 feet in any circumstance. Additionally, with the February 26th guidance, the CDC provided a new model using this color system for measuring transmission rates within a given community. So if you look at this chart, these are the same two metrics that the CDC and the Pennsylvania Department of Health and Department of Education have been sharing since the beginning. And that is the total number of new infections in a given community, or in this case, Allegheny County, per 100,000 residents over a 7-day time period, and the percentage of positivity of testing during a 7-day time period. If you look at the data in front of you, the red numbers represent the current data as of the end of the week, March 12th, 2021. So that first indicator still has the county in the substantial range according to this newest CDC guidance. The percent positivity rate is in moderate and is at the low end of moderate at this point. With this new model and using this new color system, the CDC provided school districts with guidance on the learning models that should be considered when a community is at a particular level of transmission, either low, moderate, substantial, or high. The red sun symbol represents where Allegheny County is at the present time based on the slide that we just saw. So if we go back one slide, you'll see that we have one metric that is in the orange substantial category, the other metric in the moderate yellow category. So when we move ahead to this learning model guidance, what we see is that K-12 schools that are in moderate or low can be open for full in-person instruction at 6 feet to the greatest extent possible. When they are in the substantial or high transmission, elementary schools are recommended to be in the hybrid learning mode. Middle school and high schools could be in the hybrid mode or potentially in virtual only modes depending on the particular situation. There's some guidance at the bottom as well for considerations for sports and extracurricular activities. Again, this is guidance. These are not requirements. What you're going to hear later is that the recommendation that the administration is putting forth this evening for an adjustment to our models at the middle school and high school represent a situation where we are in between a moderate and substantial transmission level with respect to these learning models and the recommendations and guidance from the CDC. In order to make these decisions, the administration looks at a lot of different data points. In particular, the two we've already discussed, which is number of cases over a 7-day period, or in this case, this is a CDC document looking at a 14-day time period, and this is closer and more aligned to the Department of Education's views on how we designate the county for the low, moderate, and substantial. So those designations change if a county stays at a certain level for a 2-week time period. But with this particular piece of data, this is called the Dynamic School Decision Maker. And this is also a CDC tool that was shared with school districts. And what you do is you enter your county's data onto this sheet, and it gives you some longitudinal data as to how transmission is progressing within a community, or in this case, this is Allegheny County data, over a period of weeks. So if you look at the data in front of you, what you will see is that with respect to cases from January 8th to end of last week, March 12th, there has been a decline almost every week with the exception of February 26th in the case counts in Allegheny County. However, it should be noted that that orange color, those numbers are still considered in the higher transmission risk category. When we move down to percent of PCR positivity, percent of individuals testing positive in Allegheny County, again, with the exception of February 26th, the week ending February 26th, there has been a significant decrease from early January until the end of last week. It is with this data in mind, and the fact that our school district is implementing all of the key and secondary mitigation strategies, as you can see from the chart, that the district now believes we can recommend additional in-person learning, on-campus learning in our middle school and high school. One final piece of data that we want to discuss this evening comes from the Allegheny County Health Department. And the chart you see in front of you is the number of school cases that have been documented by the Allegheny County Health Department by age group. So we see elementary to early middle, students age 5 to 12, students age 13 to 18, and then our adult staff members. And if you look at the chart, one thing you will see is even though school districts saw the biggest increases in countywide transmission in November, We closed our buildings in November, December, and January due to that transmission. When we reopened in our hybrid in early January, you can see that the numbers have significantly increased for students in both the 5 to 12 and 13 to 18 age group. You will note this data is from the Allegheny County Health Department dated March 11th. So the month of March was only 11 days in. So those March numbers obviously aren't end of month data points. But for February, you can see while it was possible to return to in-person learning, that did not mean that we saw numbers of cases amongst school-age students decrease when we reopened schools. So even though the county transmission has improved, not all of the data is trending positively with respect to school cases as we've reopened since late winter. All this is to say, we believe there still needs to be mitigation and a cautious approach to reopening for more on-campus and in-person learning. One thing you will note when you look at this particular data is that our staff and adult numbers have continued to decline and or only increase at much smaller rates than our student data numbers. The other piece of important data that will help schools to provide more on-campus learning is vaccinations. So Governor Wolf and the Department of Education collaborated to prioritize teachers with the rollout and approval of the new J&J Johnson & Johnson Janssen vaccines. So locally, our K-5 teachers, support staff, special educators, ESL, and bus drivers should receive vaccinations by the end of this week in March. And our Tier 2 individuals, which is our 612 teachers and support staff, should finish receiving vaccinations by early April. So what you see in front of you is about approximately 60% of those registered for vaccine were in Tier 1, about 40% in Tier 2. But all of our educators and our staff members should have received a vaccine or will receive a vaccine by early April, with efficacy hoping to be in place by mid to late April with regard to the protection that those vaccines provide. So what does that data and guidance and vaccination update mean with respect to how we may adjust our planning for trimester 3? First, I want to speak a little bit about on-campus learning. There seems to be some misinformation across many communities in southwestern Pennsylvania, but also locally, as we see in our own school district and in our own Quaker Valley community with regard to schools being open. We've heard several times that we need to get students back in school or that our schools need to open. The reality is Quaker Valley has provided on-campus learning opportunities for all Quaker Valley students since the very first day of school. Because we layered mitigation efforts and we have the ability to use a cohorting model in our elementaries, the fact that we were able to provide an online fully synchronous model in elementary, we have been on campus 4 days a week for all students that wanted that capability since the beginning of the school year. In our secondary school, 612, it is a very different situation. First, there was no means of providing a complete online school for middle school and high school. You can't hire the number of staff that you would need to create an entire parallel middle school and high school program as is able to be done in the elementary school. Secondly, our classrooms at the middle school and high school are not as large as the classrooms in the elementary schools, and our students obviously are older and larger and take up more space in those classrooms. The third factor with grades 6 through 12 is that a cohort model is not possible. Students taking various electives, students in multiple levels of their coursework, whether it be academic honors or AP. Students are mixing throughout the day in many of their classes and in our hallways. So there was no means for cohorting students to an individual classroom for the majority of the day in our secondary schools. And because of that, we needed to use a hybrid model to maintain 6 feet of physical distance in all of our classrooms. We began in trimester 1 with a 1-day on-campus hybrid with 3 days of live synchronous instruction and 1 asynchronous day. Then in trimester 2, we used the data we had, we looked at different technological tools, we studied the matter, and we took another incremental step and moved to 2 days on campus. At the same time, we changed technological platforms from a Zoom model where the teacher was not in the classroom to a live streaming model where teachers and students were together in the classroom, and that the instruction was being provided in parallel with the on-campus students being present at the same time that the students were live synchronously. Now that we're in trimester 3, and now that our data suggests that COVID transmission rates are improving in Allegheny County, and now that we have vaccinations for all faculty and staff on the horizon, we believe we can take that next incremental step and recommend a transition to a 3-day on-campus model, which will obviously continue to mean 1 day of live synchronous instruction through the live stream and 1 asynchronous day, which will remain Wednesday. But as is noted here, should transmission rates continue to decline in the county and in our community, we will continue to adjust days as the conditions change, with the ultimate goal, as we've said from the very first day of school, we want our students in our buildings as often as possible, receiving instruction from our teachers in our classrooms because we know that is where they learn best. So with respect to elementary, the model will stay the same for trimester 3. What we have in front of you are a few updates to our elementary model just to inform the community as to these changes. So while we've made some updates, the actual model and delivery of instruction will not change. So in our kindergarten level, we had 2 online classrooms. Given the number of students that are returning on campus, we now only need 1 online classroom, and the other online teacher will be shifting to Edgeworth Elementary School for a 4th grade leave. In 1st grade, we will have no change. We will have 2 online sections, same in grade 2. In 3rd grade, with the number of students returning to campus, we were able to open an additional on-campus section at Edgeworth Elementary School. All of our returning on-campus students for trimester 3 will attend Edgeworth Elementary School in that 3rd grade section, and we will reduce the online to 1. We have no change. We'll remain with 2 online sections in grade 4. And similar to grade 3, we're going to reduce to 1 online section in grade 5. We're going to open an on-campus section. That section will be housed at Osborne Elementary School. The same teachers that have been teaching 5th grade will continue to teach 5th grade, and they will share the online and on-campus responsibilities, and all those returning 5th grade students will attend Osborne Elementary School. The reason to only open a single section and have students from both buildings attend, 1, it's very difficult to find faculty at this point in the school year. And 2nd, when you add a section to the elementary schools, those students need to have their art and their lunch and their recess and music and physical education and all of those other special classes. So there has to be enough room in the schedules of those teachers to add an additional classroom. And so it helps with the scheduling to only add 1 classroom per school building so that we can maintain the level of support and maintain the level of minutes of instruction in all of those courses for all of our students. So the biggest change and the biggest recommendation is a shift from a 2-day hybrid model to a 3-day hybrid model, and this is our recommendation to begin during the third trimester for grades 6 through 12. What this basically will look like is, instead of dividing our students in half and having only 50% of the on-campus students attend on certain days, we are going to break the students into 4 groups based on last name in the alphabetical groupings that you see in the top row of this chart. What will then occur is that each group will be assigned 3 days of on-campus learning. So for example, group 1, last names A through F, they will attend on campus on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. They will maintain their live stream on Monday, and they will have asynchronous instruction on Wednesdays, as they have all along the second trimester. What this allows for is an additional day of on-campus instruction for all of our students. It is one step closer to returning to 100% classroom capacity. This will be a 75% hybrid instead of a 50% hybrid. What this will do is allow us to maintain 6 feet of physical distancing in the majority of our classrooms, but not all of our classrooms. We will maintain 6 feet of physical distancing during lunches, and there will be no room for less than 6 feet because students are not wearing masks while they are having lunch. So the high school will have to use additional space in the gymnasium. The middle school will have to use additional space in the auditorium, but we will have 6 feet of physical distancing in this model during all of our lunch periods. And we're excited about this move. We're excited to add an additional day of on-campus instruction to our hybrid model, but we'd be remiss in not pointing out that all of these decisions do in fact have both positive and negative consequences. So obviously there is a positive to an additional day of on-campus learning, students in school with their teachers and with their fellow classmates. That is a positive. It's a move towards a more normal schedule. Students having to wake up and get back on a schedule 3 days a week is a move and a transition that we think is positive for those choosing on campus. And another positive that comes from this is students that have been in the alphabetical split in the hybrid have not had an opportunity to be in school or have class with students in the other half of the alphabet. With the 3-day hybrid, at least 2 days per week, all students will have class with all other alphabetical groupings. So if you have a friend and they don't share your alphabet group currently, there will be at least 2 days a week that those students will begin to have class, and they will be in school at the same time. So we know many students have said what's been hard is they don't see certain classmates. In this model, they will see all of their classmates at least 2 days per week. However, there also are some negative consequences that need to be considered with regard to the 3-day hybrid in this recommendation. The first of which is that some classrooms will only allow for 4+ feet of physical distancing instead of the 6 feet being guaranteed. As we know, the guidance is 6 feet to the fullest extent possible. There is no guidance currently that there is safety at less than 6 feet. So we know that by going at less than 6 feet in certain classrooms, there is an incremental risk factor for students that are only 4 feet apart. The second is that contact tracing does become more complex and time consuming. In the current model where everyone is 6 feet apart, we rarely have students that are considered close contacts of other students when there's a positive case. So if there's a positive COVID-19 case in a classroom, anyone that was 6 feet or greater is not considered a close contact and does not have to be put on an attendance restriction, or more broadly, we call it quarantine. The negative consequence will be that in our classrooms where we have less than 6 feet, if there are students that are at less than 6 feet to a positive case, they will be considered a close contact. They will need to quarantine. In that case, the additional negative consequences, this could cause disruption to more students because they are sitting less than 6 feet apart. And if they have to be quarantined, this could mean being home and not on campus and having instruction for that 7 or 10-day time period. If you are involved in spring athletics and you are a close contact of a positive case, you may miss time during your athletic season, and it could have an impact on activities. So if we are less than 7 to 10 days from the prom, for example, and there was a positive case and students were considered close contacts, they would need to be quarantined and they wouldn't be allowed to attend that particular activity, in this case, the prom. So while we are excited and we believe that an additional day of on-campus learning is warranted at this point, we must make sure we are communicating clearly the positive and potential negative impacts of such a move. What is the timeline for transition to these updates for trimester 3? Well, first, all of the updates to the elementary program that we discussed have already commenced and began yesterday, March 15th, with the start of the new trimester. The secondary 3-day hybrid will begin on March 29th, 2021. That is a short week and will give the schools, the teachers, and the administration an opportunity to make adjustments because it is a short week. When we return from the short spring break, we will be in full 3-day hybrid model for all students grades 6 through 12. Based on what is being shared in this presentation, we understand that some parents who made a decision in early to mid-February as to the model that they selected may want to make a change now due to the 3-day hybrid. If that's the case, if students had previously selected fully online and now want a 3-day hybrid or vice versa, there will be an opportunity for parents to select to make those changes. We will be sharing a specific form, which will be a trimester 3 change form, with all middle and high school families tomorrow, March 17th. Those forms will be due back on Tuesday, March 23rd. That information will be received by email, and additional details will be contained within that communication, as well as how to fill out the change form and who needs to fill out the change form. It will only be parents that are selecting a completely different model. So if you're in a 2-day hybrid currently, you're automatically enrolled in the 3-day hybrid. You will not need to complete a change form. It will only be online moving to on-campus or on-campus moving to online that will need to complete those forms. To conclude tonight's presentation, I would just like to remind everyone we are all in this together. This has been a very challenging year. I could not be more proud of the Quaker Valley community, our faculty and staff, our school board, our administration, and everyone that's taken part in making this year possible. While it has been difficult, we have had on-campus instruction in some form since the beginning of the school year and 4 days a week in the elementary. We have maintained our activities, we have maintained our athletic programs, and we've done our very best to turn a very challenging situation into the very best opportunities for learning that we can for our Quaker Valley students and their families. We are very, very pleased with the progress that we've made, and we look forward to making additional changes throughout the remainder of the 2020-21 school year. Thank you.